Berlinah Wallace went to extreme lengths when her former partner, Mark van Dongen, ended their relationship. Their relationship was stressful and toxic, and Mark had enough. And things should just end there. However, Berlinah had other plans. She was thinking, if I cannot have you, nobody can. Today, we're going to discuss the case of Berlinah Wallace. Hi friends, welcome back to another true crime episode. I'm Faiza, and every week I talk about true crime story. So if you're interested in true crime, makeup, horror films, then you've come to the right place, and let's get into today's case. So Berlinah was born in South Africa to her parents. She had a mother and a stepfather. Her actual father was missing in action. I think he was just not really part of Berlinah's life. I don't think she's ever met him based on my research. And apparently her parents were very, very abusive. So Berlinah had a terrible childhood, and it all started with her getting pregnant at the age of 14. So Berlinah did have a boyfriend, and he was very sweet. However, they were just kids, and as I said, she fell pregnant. And after that, as she was carrying her baby for a few months, the baby died. So she had a miscarriage. She was devastated because she did wanted to keep the baby, but she was only 14 years old. To make matters worse, her boyfriend also died from unknown causes. So already Berlinah is traumatized. Everybody that she loves is either abusing her or has died, and this had affected her enormously. So as the years rolled by, Berlinah's personality became so much more volatile. I mean, we can understand that she lost her baby, her boyfriend died, her mother doesn't love her, her stepdad is abusing her. I don't think he abused her sexually based on the research, but he was just an awful human being. Both of them were. Oh, I also forgot to add a trigger warning. So today's case, there are themes of suicide, mass raping, domestic violence. So viewer discretion is advised. So during her time in South Africa, Berlinah was attacked by a group of men, and this is where she was raped by all of them. It was absolutely horrifying. They took her to a secluded place and they attacked her one by one. And because of this attack, she contracted HIV. She didn't tell a soul that she had HIV, but she just kept that to herself. And because of that, she decided to migrate to the UK for a fresh start. She has basically no family in South Africa, and she got attacked. She's completely traumatized, so she was like, I am out of here. And then she went to the UK. So let's move on to Mark van Dongen. He was a Dutch nationalist that was born in the Netherlands. His father, Cornelius, described him as an empathetic, sweet, and considerable man. Mark had no competitive bone in his body, and when he was young, he was playing this game that involved marbles, and you and your opponent need to throw marbles and try and hit a target, and whoever hits the target gets to keep all of the marbles. And each time Mark won, he would give his marbles and their marbles back, so he would make sure that nobody loses. So he's that kind of person. He cares about other people. So as the years rolled by, Mark decided to become an engineer. So he studied in the Netherlands, and by the time he graduated and passed with flying colors, he migrated to the UK. He went to Bristol specifically to start his career, and he quickly flourished. However, this is where he met the she-devil, Berlinah Wallace. So Berlinah, she was there in Bristol. This is where she located. Remember how she left South Africa and now she went to the UK. She was in Bristol as well. And she was a fashion student in a nearby university. And however, she decided to not pursue a career after that, because shortly when she met Mark on a dating app, that was specific for people that have HIV, their relationship just flourished. They connected immediately, they started moving in together, and they just were attracted to one another. At the beginning, everything was very good. Berlinah had this whole mask on how she's a wonderful person at the beginning, but before you know it, things were getting very volatile. She became verbally abusive towards Mark. She kept causing an argument for the sake of arguing. She would just pick fights with him, and it became draining. So the relationship was on again, off again. Mark was working, Berlinah wasn't, so she was always at home, bombarding him with calls and texts and accusing him of cheating on her all the time, even though he wasn't. Because like I said, Mark was a good person, and his personality is of a man that really cares for his people. Berlinah was 20 years older than Mark. However, that didn't bother him at all because they had a lot of things in common, you see. But Mark was very considerate of other people's feelings, like I said. So he kept giving Berlinah a second chance, a third chance. And he doesn't want to abandon the people that he loves, So he was obviously in love with Berlinah, and when things were bad, he believed, this is just my personal opinion, he believed that, okay, this relationship is worth fighting for. And usually in domestic violent relationships, when you're in love with someone that's hurting you, you can't just get up and leave. You're gonna be, having this internal struggle, whether you should leave, start again, move on. Because Mark really does believe in solving problems. He didn't want to feel like he was abandoning Berlinah. So that's why he kept coming back to her, Because she was also very manipulative. Because not only was she calling him all hours of the day and night, accusing him of cheating, she would threaten her own life. Like, if you stop interacting with me and if you don't text me back, I'm going to hurt myself. And he didn't want to be responsible for any of that, So it was shocking what she was saying to him. So with all of this stress going on, Mark was very much drained. Most of his friends, his family, his dad would see him less and less. He would interact with nobody but Berlinah. He felt very trapped in this relationship. And over time, it could wear you down, So he honestly didn't know what to do. It was really sad. I just feel so bad for him because he just didn't know what to do. Because if he was to leave, Berlinah could, quote unquote, unalive herself. And he honestly did believe her, So he thought, if I get out of this relationship, she will hurt herself. And that's obviously, he doesn't want to live with that guilt, And who would lie about things like that? He didn't think she was lying, but she was. There was no way for her to take her own life because all she wanted was control. She didn't love Mark the way Mark loved her. Not only was the abuse verbal, but Berlinah would also physically assault Mark. This is by scratching him and throwing hard objects around the house. They would have screaming matches, She would accuse him of cheating. She would accuse him of stealing from her, even though she's not working and he's financially providing for her. So I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but they are living together and he was just taking care of her. He paid for everything and she just decided to stay home and be volatile. And she just wanted control, like I said. And at one point, she would boil some hot water. And while Mark was having a nap or he wasn't paying attention, she would just throw it at him. He had 2-degree burns and he went to the hospital regarding all of that. And he was so ashamed because he was being abused by a woman, and it's very demasculating. And how are you going to, seek help when all of this is happening? Because maybe he felt ashamed. I don't know. So the relationship was on again, off again. And he just was getting sick and tired of the abuse. So he would spend more time at work and she would blow up his phone. She would call him, text him paragraphs to the point where his phone overheated. and it broke, so he had to get a new one. He would stay with family and friends whilst Berlinah was having her episodes and so on, and he just didn't know what to do. So Mark had enough from all of this abuse, because he honestly didn't see Berlinah getting better. He realized that she's getting worse and worse. So he decided to file a temporary restraining order. And I was thinking, why temporary? But there are different types of orders out there. In the UK, we call it a non-molestation order. So with that said, Berlinah wasn't allowed to contact him. So the terms and conditions were you're not allowed to call him, text him, be within a certain amount of feet from his address and so on. However, Mark was a sweetheart and he allowed Berlinah to stay in the home that they were living at until she gets back on her feet. However, she had no intention of getting back on her feet because she was obsessed with Mark. She was just all consumed by him. She wasn't thinking about her future. She wasn't thinking about moving on. She was thinking about how I could take him down. So she goes on Amazon and you'll never believe what she purchased. She purchased sulfuric acid, 98% sulfuric acid. And it doesn't take an idiot to know what she's planning to do with it. Next day delivery, it comes right outside her doorstep. She picks up the package and she rips off the label and she leaves it right there. It looks like a regular bottle of water and nobody would suspect a thing. You would not think, oh, there's corrosive acid right there. So now Mark is a free man and he is single. He's dating again and he goes on a different dating app and he meets a woman called Violet. So him and Violet are hitting it off and they instantly fall into a romantic relationship. And somehow Berlinah finds out about his business. I think she contacted his friends or maybe she started stalking him. I'm not entirely sure, but she ends up finding out all of his intimate details. And side note, if you're going through a breakup, you shouldn't keep tabs on what your ex is doing. Move on. It's not the end of the world. People fall in love again. It's not that deep. Leave the person alone because it's illegal. It is desperate. It is bad. You shouldn't stalk someone and disturb their peace. Thank you. So Berlinah kept calling him over and over and over again. And his phone kept buzzing and buzzing. And he had absolutely no peace. So he was like, you know what? He went to visit Berlinah a few times, tried to break up with her amicably. He kept paying for her bills until she gets back on her feet, like I said earlier. And he was such a wonderful person, He was really nice to her. Despite all of the abuse that he endured, he was still really looking out for her best interest because he kind of believed that she was having some sort of mental crisis and she told him about all of the horrific things that she went through. So he had a soft spot for her. So Berlinah was pleading with Mark, saying that she wants to start all over again. She's trying to salvage the relationship, but Mark has made up his mind. He wants to move on and put this whole relationship behind him. I honestly wish that Mark blocked her number, but that isn't the case. So Mark tried everything to, make Berlinah understand that the relationship is over, and she wouldn't understand. She wouldn't accept the fact that he doesn't want her anymore. He fell out of love. He wanted to move on. But one evening, it changed Mark's life forever. So on September 22nd, 2015, Mark decided to go to Berlinah's house for the last time and to, amicably end the relationship. So Berlinah was stalling, wasting time, and Mark was there for hours and hours. Before you know it, they started arguing again. She became volatile. She started throwing things, and then she calmed down. She convinced Mark that she will stay in a nearby motel so he can just stay in the house and leave in the morning. She's going to arrange her way to get out of the house in the very next morning and she will move on, leave him alone, and that is that. So at 3 a.m., Mark was obviously asleep. He was on the bed. He was wearing nothing but boxers, and Berlinah breaks in. She sneaks into the house and she stands by the bedside. Like a sleep paralysis demon, she was there in the middle of the night staring at him. And then she said to him, she whispered by his ear and told him, "If I can't have you, nobody can." She then throws the sulfuric acid all over him. Mark wakes up. He is screaming. He is in terrible pain. Clumps of his skin were melting off. He screamed from the top of his lungs and he leaped out of that bedroom onto the outside. He was just screaming. The neighbors came out and they were trying to calm him down. Another neighbor noticed all of the commotion as well, and he brought Mark inside of the home and tried to rinse him off with cold water. However, it was too late. Mark lost an eye, an ear. He was unrecognizable and he lost complete consciousness. I can't believe it. Mark was maimed and disfigured from the waist down. And this is worse than murder because she stole his future, his ability to move on. She couldn't handle the fact that he doesn't love her anymore. And Berlinah had no choice but to move on with her life. And some people out there, they simply can't mentally comprehend that people can fall out of love with you. And this is just another case of severe domestic violence, fatal attraction, and there is no excuse in the world to do this to someone. So as the neighbors called the ambulance and the police, Berlinah was just sitting in the living room, smoking a cigarette, and she was speaking to her friend on the phone. She seemed nonchalant. She didn't help Mark at all, and she was just sitting there calmly as all of the commotion was going on the outside. Mark has suffered from 79% burns all over his body, his legs, and parts of his body was decomposing because his leg was so severely burnt that surgeons in the hospital said to his father that they have no choice but to amputate an arm and a leg, his right leg specifically. So around 4 a.m., Berlinah was arrested by the police, and she came up with the most ridiculous story. She mentioned that she was arguing with Mark and she threw water at him instead of acid. However, the extensive Google searches about what will happen if somebody gets attacked by acid, and she was Googling severe acid cases. She was Googling what happens to your body when you have acid on you. And she also Googled Katie Piper. And if you don't know who Katie Piper is, she is a TV personality that was attacked in 2008 by her former partner, and he hired a person to throw acid in her face. Berlinah also removed the label on the bottle of acid in order just to cover her tracks. Obviously, she didn't want to alert the authorities like, oh, by the way, I threw acid on purpose. Obviously, all of this was premeditated. Berlinah bought acid from Amazon and she made sure she got the strongest solution. She bought industrial acid, used for industrial things, and she was planning to do this to Mark because she bought the acid off Amazon on the 2nd of September, and on the 22nd is when she bought Mark in order to execute her horrific plans. So back to Mark, he spent 3 months in Southmead Hospital under the intensive care unit. The medical team put him in an induced coma, and when he woke up, he was completely paralyzed from the neck down. His face was disfigured. He was blind in one eye. His right leg and left arm was amputated from the knee down, from the elbow down. He kept fighting multiple infections and he felt itchy all over. He was in constant pain, and his dad didn't recognize him in the beginning. But Mark told him, please just kill me now. I don't want to look at the ceiling for the rest of my life. As the weeks went on, Mark kept getting infections here, there, everywhere. He even went into septic shock. So after all of this suffering, he asked his father to help him end his life. But before he requested for his life to end, Mark was taken to a private hospital in Gloucestershire, and this is where he was completely neglected. He was left alone to starve. His dad found him covered in his own feces. So things got worse with Mark. The doctors recommended to put a tube inside of his lungs to help him breathe because his lungs were collapsing. And that will also take the ability from him being able to speak. And at that point, Mark had enough. He was completely over it. So his dad agreed, and he could see his son was just suffering, and there was no way for Mark to get better. The damage has already been done. So on January 2nd, 2017, Mark wanted to spend his final moments with his father, and then at 7:15 exactly in the evening, doctors walked in and placed a catheter in Mark's heart, and they have tragically taken his life. He was only 29 years old. So back to the she-devil, Berlinah. In April 2018, the trial started. She kept her innocence. The nerve of this woman. She kept her innocence. Her bogus story was, oh my God, I threw water at him. I didn't know it was acid. We were having an argument. And she accused Mark of being abusive. But due to the overwhelming evidence, the prosecution really leaned against the evidence, saying that Berlinah purposefully bought the acid off Amazon. She planned this attack alongside the extensive Google searches on what would happen if you throw corrosive acid at someone, and she knew what she was doing. Berlinah couldn't fathom the fact that Mark broke up with her and he no longer wanted to be with her, and he went into a new relationship. Maybe Mark moved on far too quickly, but that doesn't matter. But for Berlinah, she really was jet set on, if I can't have you, nobody can. Her intentions were to permanently disfigure him so no woman wants him. That is what her intentions were. She just couldn't let go. She couldn't accept the fact that he doesn't want you anymore. But I feel like heartbreak is just a part of life. Like, why would people go to these extreme lengths? Like, I could never understand. Like why do this? So the prosecution wanted a first-degree murder charge. However, due to Mark going through a voluntary euthanasia in Belgium, Berlinah technically didn't murder Mark, you know? This is in the eyes of the law. This is not my opinion. Berlinah was then charged with throwing a corrosive substance with intent. And she was charged a minimum of 12 years imprisonment. So I tried to find out what prison she was in. However, they kept that very hidden. I don't know why. So Berlinah has to serve a minimum of 12 years. It doesn't mean after 12 years she'll be released, but she has to serve a minimum of 12 years and then she'll be considered for parole. So her parole hearing will be in 2027, and that's just 2 years from now. I honestly think justice wasn't served because she really ruined Mark's life and he had no choice but to end it because his quality of life was just taken away. I honestly hope that she never sees the light of day again. So my friends, this is the heartbreaking story of what has happened to Mark van Dongen. He was an innocent young man. He was only 29 years old. He had friends, family. He was a wonderful human being. And he was a wonderful boyfriend to Berlinah. She couldn't see it. She was depraved. She was just evil. She made sure that he would never, ever move on. And she succeeded, unfortunately. I really hope that Mark's family find peace. I just don't know what to say. This case is just so tragic, heartbreaking, malicious, callous. I could go on and on. Please do stay safe and hydrated, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.